All right, good afternoon, and welcome to this week's Iowa Learning Farms Conservation webinar. I'm Matt Homers with Iowa State University and the Iowa Nutrient Research Center, and great pleasure to get to moderate the webinar again today. As always, if you have questions, please feel free to type those in the chat box, and we'll get those to the speaker at the end of the talk. And we're really fortunate today to have Kara Salazar, that's the Assistant Program Leader and Extension Specialist at Purdue University and the Illinois-Indiana Sea Grant. And she's going to be talking to us about one block at a time, community-driven planning and equitable adaptation through multi-benefit green infrastructure. That's a little bit of a mouthful, at least for me, this noon, maybe a little tired. So I want to welcome Kara to the Iowa Learning Farms webinar. And again, feel free to type any questions for her in the chat box. I think we have Sarah McMillan on as well. And Sarah said, Sarah is a faculty member here at Iowa State University, but was at Purdue University, and I think worked with Kara. And Sarah said she'd be on if there are some questions as well that maybe Kara can't answer. So with that, you didn't come to listen to me talk. I'll turn it over to Kara.
Great, thanks so much, Matt. I'm very happy to be here today. And yes, Sarah McMillan is one of the collaborators and my co-investigator. We co-investigate together for the Indiana portion of this project. So she focuses on the engineering side of this effort. I'm an environmental planner and do community development work as well. And so by the end of this presentation too, I will walk you through what each of these different parts of our title mean. It is a mouthful, but you'll learn more about how we conducted a community-driven process and planning to adapt communities in an equitable way to changing climate and extreme weather events with multi-benefit green infrastructure aspects. And to get started too, I also want to recognize the other members of our team. This is very much a big collaboration and a multidisciplinary team. This project was funded through a National Sea Grant Water Equity Grant. It was an internal competition among our Sea Grant program. And our team was successful in this. And so together with Minnesota Sea Grant and Pennsylvania Sea Grant, and Sarah and I working with Illinois Sea Grant, created this project using a one block at a time framework. And before I get into that too, a little bit more about why we selected these 4 different locations. When the team came together, we were looking for communities that are experiencing some level of social vulnerabilities. And so these are including things like housing, food, and transportation access, coupled with experiencing climate change impacts, things like extreme weather events, particularly with heat, flooding, and drought, so that we could create a program and process to support these communities using a one block at a time framework that can be replicated throughout other parts of their communities in broader regions as well. The one block at a time framework, if you're not familiar with it, is what it's intending, working at a smaller parcel scale or a neighborhood scale to look at where we can design and implement different types of green infrastructure, community-led projects that can support a broader range of efforts that are occurring in a community. So for our particular lens, we were looking at green infrastructure aspects. And each of our projects are taking a little bit different approach, but we're still using this one block at a time framework so that we can work very locally, but that it is also informing community resilience efforts at a broader scale. And to do this, we created a 3-part process to work with our communities. We started with a common background assessment. We had some common data sources and processes we're using to look at current hazards and vulnerabilities. We then worked on a community visioning aspect. And so this is including things like focus groups, listening sessions, interviews, to learn more about what the community is experiencing and some solutions that they're interested in seeing that would work for them for the future. And the final stage is implementation. So the project that we worked on in Indiana got to the implementation part. The The Minnesota and Pennsylvania projects are working on that currently, and we'll have more information soon about theirs. At the outcome of working together, we are wrapping up this. We've been working on this project for about a year. We'll be wrapping up at the end of the year. We will have a toolkit of the different types of processes we use and a lot of information about the implementation aspects of as well. So the different types of green infrastructure that were implemented, how we did it, design specifications, and examples of some of the community engagement process that we use too, in addition to community summaries to learn more about the great groups we worked with and their unique types of projects. I'll mention briefly the other two projects and how they're working. As I mentioned, we are working at different scales. So I'll start at the broadest scale. The Pennsylvania Sea Grant has been working with a team throughout Erie, Pennsylvania, called Community Resilience Action Network of Erie. And with this effort, they have convened a group of government agencies, natural resource managers, and then have expanded to work with a lot of community organizations working within the resilience, climate, green infrastructure aspects. And what they are looking at is a broader approach through the Pennsylvania State Landscape Architecture Department, working with students to create hazard visualization models. So they're looking throughout the city, and they're narrowing in to different communities and neighborhoods to pinpoint some of the high risk areas, and then coupling that with different types of focus groups and outreach with community organizing agencies in socially vulnerable neighborhoods to talk more about some of the types of green infrastructure solutions that would be best for them. And they'll be implementing some demonstration projects later this summer. For the Minnesota component, they have been working in a neighborhood for several years. And so they have pinpointed a specific neighborhood, and they're now starting to work more on workforce development and how to work more within that aspect of green infrastructure. This Lincoln Park neighborhood does have several social vulnerabilities in addition to experiencing significant flooding and erosion. They, with all of our projects, they've done a good job of integrating students, and they have a unique AmeriCorps position that has been working with them as well. So they're in the process of finalizing their background assessment and community engagement, and we'll be looking at an implementation project here soon as well. Our project was ready to get into the neighborhood scale and implementation pretty quickly because we had been working with Purdue Extension and several of our extension educators throughout the state on identifying needs with green infrastructure. And for this particular project, we were honing in on the need of community gardens and access to water. So we had had this need identified for a while of looking into rainwater harvesting as a solution to providing additional water access for community gardens. And we had the opportunity to find two fantastic locations to work on with this project. So this was, each of our different states have large project teams in addition to having the steering committee working together too. And so this represents the Northwest Indiana project team. We worked in two different counties. The two locations are about 40 or so minutes away. So we worked in Lake County in Hammond, which is closer to Chicago border in Indiana, Northwest Indiana. And we also worked in LaPorte County in Michigan City, which is closer to Michigan. So we have the community wellness educators, ag and natural resources, and community development educators who collaborated with us. We also worked with several different departments and centers at Purdue and now with Iowa State, with Sarah moving to her new departments, and had several collaborations there. We also had 4 different students work with us, 1 from landscape architecture and 3 interns that helped with the design and the implementation. We could not have done this without the fantastic partners that we have at each of the sites too. So we ended up working with a community center, the SMIRT Community Center with Brian Thomas, who is here, and I'll tell you a little bit more about their programs here in a minute, and Angelica Navarro and Victor Roman at the Intermission site, which is here. We selected these sites because of the identified need and their willingness and interest to work on a project like this. The Smart Community Center in Michigan City is here. This is a converted old fire station. So it does have a structure there. It's on a corner lot in a neighborhood. This community center serves their neighborhood in several different ways. They have a senior lunch and gathering place for senior citizens in their area. They also have several different youth programs for after school and summer camp. In Hammond, the Intermission Community Farm is a faith-based owned property with a nearby church that has a very significant outreach and engagement arm to it. And so this community garden has been serving the neighbors as well in this location. For both sites, they have small plots of community gardens, but they are very mighty. Purdue Extension supported these two groups and finding grants and funding the installation of these gardens, as well as with the education and management of them. For each site, they did identify that water is a major issue, and they do have managers that are working with them. In this Hammond site in particular, they have no utilities, and they had to carry water several blocks to water every day. They also have a garden manager working at this site in the Smart Center who needed additional access as well. So we started with our collaborative meetings and site planning, working with each of these garden managers and the site users. We had a series of interviews and focus group meetings with those key groups. We also met with the seniors that have lunch there and rely on the garden beds quite a bit for their extra produce. So we went through several different questions in these different topic areas to learn more about current conditions, future interests, and what currently is working in the site and what we need to think about. And of course, the main issue is connecting, or the main thing to work on is connecting people to the water that they need for this, enhancing their garden spaces. We honed in on the water budget so that we could understand a little bit more about their constraints and opportunities. So how they're currently using the irrigation that they have, what they need to use in the future, and what kinds of storage might be possible. Ultimately, we designed these outcomes with our community groups. We settled on working on a co-design and implementation of on-site rainwater harvesting. We also have, we designed and installed 2 small rain gardens to manage overflow so that we are channeling water to where we want it to go. And on-site education and engagement, both for the garden managers and the site users that are there, and for neighborhood residents who are using the sites. Something that came up more specifically within the intermission site in Hammond is zoning and building permits. And so part of the process and part of the information that we compiled to help future groups too is working through this effort. So sometimes this can be an afterthought, which it needs to be on the forefront too, so that you have proactive planning to prevent any unexpected changes and costs down the line. So we wanted to make sure to work with local government, and we served as a bridge to help the community groups navigate who to go to and how to get the permitting process finalized. So we have some guidance that we've created about looking into ordinances and working with local planners. We also started thinking through different types of rainwater harvesting systems. We knew that we wanted to, of course, support the sites and their community gardens. We wanted something to look aesthetically pleasing and to work with what they have in place in their community sites. And we also wanted to make sure that we were minimizing health risks. So we spent quite a bit of time investigating that part, so that because we did know these were going to be irrigating vegetable plots. And so we have some additional guidance and information, as well as the design that we created to do so. As part of our focus groups and interviews and meetings with community groups, we did some visual preference small surveys. So we had a series of photos and had some discussions about the different types of features that could be possible within the realm of what we could work with and design and install for rainwater harvesting and the irrigation practices. And so this is what we settled on with from the meetings, and based on the needs of the community, having some sort of rain barrel cistern system here, having drip lines, and creating in the one location a structure to gather the rainwater as well. And so that is what we went from with having that, after gathering our feedback and doing additional research and investigation on some of the practices that could be possible. So for the Submerged Center, when we started into this collaborative design process, we knew that they wanted to control their stormwater runoff and reduce flooding. They had some flooding in their basement before. They also wanted to have additional capacity for watering and not use as much as they do have a potable system too. They do have an outside spigot, but using perhaps less of that as well. They do have an existing building, so we were able to use the existing roof and gutter system to collect the rainwater. So that was a really nice opportunity and approach there. We ended up purchasing and working with a fairly local vendor that was not too far from the sites. This is a 330 gallon tank. We also installed a gutter filter for debris removal and the first flush system. So these are both in place too to help from the health components for gathering rainwater harvesting and using it for irrigation practices. We also set up drip irrigation systems, and for the Submerged Center, there are two different setups here. One system does use the potable water in the spigots, and the other one is using the roof harvested rainwater. These are designed to prevent the pressure loss, and so they have, you can see the setup here, and have the different lines coming in from the different locations and can be set up from either side. The rain garden that we designed and installed is 100 square feet and 12 inches deep. We knew with this system, they could potentially get more water and have water stored and need more of an overflow. So we designed to accommodate that system there. So water is going into this rain garden and filtering out where we want it to go, but it's still in close proximity to the gardens, and they can have easy access for watering. For the intermission site in Hammond, as I mentioned, we had no utilities at this site, and water had been carried in buckets for quite some time and was quite a burden to the site managers. So this resulted in designing a larger rainwater catchment and irrigation system. The community group also wanted some additional enhancements, and we were able to work with the landscape architecture student to think about how the placement of the site and how we could enhance it. This is what the landscape architecture student came up with. He did a fantastic job doing background assessments and site assessments of the location and looking at existing conditions and thinking through some different possibilities. And at the end of it, we were able to install several of the components that he came up with, and they have a future then to work from. This in particular is a meditation path that they really liked from his design, and we were able to install that during a volunteer work day. So for the rainwater irrigation, we designed two 100-foot structures. This has a monosloping roof with gutters and the same type of cistern as the previous site that you saw. This also has a first flush system directed to the rain garden, which is much smaller than the previous one. As I mentioned, we're creating a community toolkit and using these sites as somewhat of a pilot and replication idea for other locations. So we were able to work with several different types of engineers, including professional engineers, to draw up the plans. We did submit these to the community, to the planning and building officials to have approval. And we have these so that we can use them for the future as well. The idea is we wanted to try to design both structures with materials that we could get at a local hardware store, big box store, so that people with some skills and expertise could put these together without additional contractors if needed. So we did reach those goals, although there were several lessons learned in how to design and construct both of these sites. We put in a drip irrigation system here too, also to minimize head loss and to run with as little water pressure as possible, because this tank needed to use every single bit of water within this system, because there was nothing else there. They were able to work with the fire department to have it filled in a couple of different times during times of drought. And we did put in a valve to run some systems separately so they could manage their site a little bit better too, if some beds needed more water than others. The rain garden was much smaller because we knew that we would need to use as much water as possible. However, on days when we'd have more rain, we wanted to make sure to channel and infiltrate the water in an appropriate place. So we have a 35 square foot rain garden that we installed next to this system. I mentioned the meditation labyrinth peace path. It really is a nice addition to the space, and the community groups were really excited about it. We wanted to leave them with something they could use as a community gathering space, and they're excited about this structure too, so that they could use it for some shade and for some other types of activities as well. They have a produce box location where people are coming and using and coming in and out for the site too. And then finally, we do have more work to do, although we do have both of these sites installed. We've gone up a few times to check on them, to make sure that things were functioning smoothly. We're finalizing our community overview documents. So we have larger documents that we created with the background assessments, the engagement process, the design, the installation, the management of locations, and then we're creating the one-page summaries to show and highlight the work here. We're also working with our Sea Grant collaborators on developing the program toolkit that has some more information in depth, and these will be available for other extension professionals and related professionals to use. And we have a couple of extension publications that are almost done, one on rain garden design and the other one on rainwater harvesting. And we created 2 short videos to complement those extension publications as well. So we'll have more coming soon, and we'll certainly reach back out to share with you what we have as those things are complete as well. So as we mentioned, Sarah McMillan is also on the call today too. So if you have engineering questions about the sites, happy to have her address those. I'm happy to address the planning, the community engagement, and other types of green infrastructure process questions as well. So thanks so much for your interest in this program, and I look forward to sharing some new things too as we're finishing up this year.
All right, thanks. Thanks, Kara. It's really exciting. I think has applicability in lots of different areas. While you catch your breath, folks can type in questions that they might have. Can feel free to do so now. And if we go to the next slide, I'll do the housekeeping items here. If you are on here and need and would like a certified crop advisor CEU, CCA CEU, please send your name, the name you entered to watch the webinar, and your CCA number to Elena Whitaker, ALENAW, at iastate.edu by 5 o'clock today. So again, to Elena W at iastate.edu, 5 o'clock today, your name, the name you entered to watch the webinar, and your CCA number. And now next slide. If you've watched this webinar live and are willing to fill out a voluntary demographic survey, you can scan that QR code, or you can go to iowalearningfarms.org/survey, and only one survey response is needed for 2023 webinar. So if you've already filled this out, thank you very much. If you would fill it out, it is voluntary, but please either scan that or go to the iowalearningfarms.org website. And then just as a plug for next week, the webinar for next week will be, if Kara can forward that slide one more time. Here we go. Soil Health Institute study to assess soil health in the Des Moines Loeb region of Iowa. So we're coming back to Iowa for next week, but we'll have discussion on soil health. As always, our webinars will be archived as long as the recordings work. And I did hit record when we started. So if you have, feel free to, or please go look at the webinar archive page. There might be something that's of interest to you. Okay, we have a couple questions here. The first one, you mentioned some about videos and then, ultimately a toolkit and extension publications. Is there a website where that is located or will be located so we can make sure folks know about that?
Sure, we're still working on that a little bit. So we have, each of our institutions has our own distribution channels. So we have our Purdue Extension, education store, and our own program kind of things that we're distributing through. But our team is deciding and thinking about how we're going to package this and how it's going to be distributed. We have a few different options, and we haven't quite honed in on that yet, but that's our next step. And we will certainly share that, that central repository when we're ready to. Because the information and the materials that we're creating and that we have are definitely applicable for throughout the Midwest and probably beyond too. But we feel comfortable saying the North Central region that you could take and use this.
Right. All right. Thanks. Okay. This may be more of a Sarah question, but I'm curious about how the rain barrel system is set up for that first flush to be diverted to the rain garden. The person with a rain barrel at home, I'm very curious about this one. So
sure, Sarah, you want to jump on in?
Yeah, could you go back to that one of the photographs for us? I think that would be helpful. And I can kind of hopefully point to one of the zoomed in versions. Oh, that one works. So essentially what this is designed to do, it's a little dark at the top, but you can kind of see this one with the white piping. It's connecting to the downspout. There's a leaf catcher right above that, so it's collecting a lot of debris off of the gutters. There are also leaf guards and the gutters. Before installing some of this, it's really important to clean out those gutters and do that maintenance every year, because one of the biggest things we're trying to do is get all of the rooftop debris away from the intake to the cistern to start with. So that way we minimize bacteria growth, we minimize algal growth, and that keeps our water as clean as we can. We can't absolutely get everything filtered out through those leaf gutters and the catcher. That's kind of like the traditional, it's like a little box that sits on top of that, and you can like clean that pretty easily right above that white piping. But what this first flush piece is, the kind of vertical line that's going down the side of the building. And essentially what that is a long tube with a little float inside. It's just like a ball, like a little plastic ball. And the water first, it goes through that into that first flush tube, so the vertical tube, as the water comes off from the first part of the rain, that fills up because there's a tiny little hole at the bottom, but it's really, really slow. And so that fills up, and then the ball floats to the top. And once that's full, then the water goes over to the cistern and fills the cistern. They would keep a tiny little hole at the bottom, so that can be kind of like poked with any sort of, like a screwdriver or any kind of tool you might have if there's any debris that gets caught in there. And then that is the elbow bend at the bottom, and that drains into the rain garden eventually as well. Yep, right.
Awesome. I'm glad I asked that question, because I couldn't intuitively envision that. So
yeah, we have a couple, trying to keep the talk reasonably timely is tricky, but there's some more design pieces around that are helpful if we wanted to dig in deeper. But yeah.
And something that we like to share here too is that this is covered with a green tarp, and so you do not want to have a clear type of rain garden or cistern to prevent algae growth. That's something some of our rainwater harvesting colleagues were pointing out when we showed this photo, and I assured them, no, this is when we were in construction, we were getting the tarp on it. So we're just showing it in different stages. And so it does have a tarp that goes on it.
Yeah, and I'll just one more small thing about this system. It's really DIY. All those parts that we built are from your local home improvement store. They're basically readily available PVC pipe components that we spray painted to match the exterior of the building to kind of make them look a little less intrusive. IBC totes, you can buy many, secondhand from many places, just being careful of what was stored in them ahead of time, and trying to get ones that maybe didn't have things like pesticides or some other chemical that would be problematic. Ours we got from a farmer, and he got them from a different place, and they actually had cough syrup in them, so we washed them out really well, but that kind of thing. So they're relatively upcycled materials, which is a nice thing to do. And we've just raised this up on some cinder blocks to give that elevation change so that we can power the irrigation systems and allow that water to flow by gravity out of those piping systems.
So here, yes, this is one, and I think maybe you'll have some plans that might help with this. You've talked about this in kind of the urban area, but this one was talked about it. First off, said wonderful project. Then the question: if you're constructing these rain collecting or watering systems in rural areas, how do you find the expertise needed to engineer and construct these systems, especially for free or a low cost?
So the design that we have for this program is we are going through our extension system too. So ideally, we're working with ag and natural resource educators and others within the extension system that have some level of expertise and work and can work with this. However, if you do not, then that's a conversation working with these different entities to identify who in your community could do that work with you. But we wanted to make it as accessible as possible with the materials, the designs, and the processes put together so that we could hand it to not knowledgeable people. But it is going to be based on local relationships too.
It seems like the plans that you have would be kind of applicable in a lot of different areas. And then, it looks like it's great to be able to procure the supplies from like you said, a hardware store, a big box store, so you're not having to necessarily get specialized
Right.
supplies, pumps, and all kinds of crazy things that might make it a little more challenging.
I would just one small thing, Matt, to add. I think that the engineering of the sizing of the tank is part of a rainwater harvesting extension document that we are putting together. So that is forthcoming, and that will be shared, can be shared soonish. Where it becomes a little more tricky is if you have to build a structure, and that is where you would need some more expertise. But if you're attaching it to an existing structure, you're just trying to size it based on your roof area, water budget, kind of balancing that, and that's in part of in that extension document.
Okay, great. Because that was one of my questions was how you determined the water needs and whether in these expansion of garden areas was considered. But the picture you're showing there you constructed constructed the kind of the collection system or the roof line to feed into the collection system.
Yeah, right. That was a big effort.
That was a big effort. We still have all the material. We put together the materials too for folks to do that. But yes, it is. That one was a lot more challenging, but doable with the right expertise.
Okay.
Absolutely.
All right.
Yep.
All right. Well, those are the questions that we have in now, Kara and Sarah. Thank you so much for the presentation. Again, if somebody needs a CCA CEU, please email Alena, ALENAW, at iastate.edu by 5 o'clock today. And then tune in next week to hear some about the soil health work in the Des Moines lobe of Iowa. And I think folks be looking out for a blog at some point when more of this information is available online. Sarah is just 2 doors down, so I'll keep knocking on her door, asking when it's ready, and so when it's ready, be sure to look out for the Iowa Learning Farms blog, and we'll get some links and information posted there. Really appreciate everyone's time today. And thanks again, Karen, Sarah, for a great presentation and really important information.
Great. Thank you so much. Appreciate being here. Happy to answer questions in the future too.
Absolutely.